Hello and welcome to another episode of the Small Agency Talk Show. I'm Chip Griffin, and my panelist today is Brad Farris with Anchor Advisors. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
It is great to have you. We always have a good time when we do these kinds of recordings together, so I'm sure the next half hour or so will be very entertaining. But before we get into the show, I've got to play the little intro because it's fun to play
Let's
intros.
do it. I'm super
Little chair dancing, yeah.
Yeah, you gotta do a little dance there. Like the Skype call music, that always makes me dance too.
Yeah, absolutely nobody needed to see what we were just doing, but it's a video show, so you're stuck with it, folks. You just, it's Friday. I'm a little bit punchy. It's snowing outside here in New Hampshire, and I don't know, is it snowing in Chicago too?
We have sun, but snow's coming for the weekend.
Gotcha. And I hear you guys have gotten a lot of snow this year.
It's about waist high out there right now, which is a lot more than it feels very Colorado actually, because it's cold and we've got like little light flakes coming down and it's beautiful actually.
Nice. Well, the format of this show, if you are tuning in for the first time, is that we talk about whatever comes to our minds. We're happy to take your questions. So use the chat comment function on whatever platform you're watching us on. If it's on YouTube, make sure you also hit the subscribe button so you get notified whenever this crazy show reappears in your stream. Hopefully every Friday at noon Eastern time, God willing. So Brad, what's cooking in your world? What's what are you hearing from your agency clients? What's big?
Well, I think that the big topic amongst my clients is new business. That we saw things drop off at the beginning of the pandemic and then kind of come back for the summer. And then somewhere in the fourth quarter, things just kind of came to a screeching halt. And it's not that there isn't a pipeline. It's just that pipeline is not moving in any predictable way. And that's got people nervous, understandably, I think. And how about you? What are you seeing? Are you seeing something similar?
Yeah, I would say the general trend is similar. A lot of the agencies that I'm talking to, they're excited about the potential that's in the pipeline, but they're seeing it as stuck. There's not a lot of movement from pipeline to new client. There's a trickle. I mean, I wouldn't say we're at a place with most of the folks that I'm talking to where there's any sense of alarm or anything like that yet. But it is slower than it was at the end of the third quarter, start of the fourth quarter, when there's that real rebound, I think, that took place last year.
Yeah. Where were you in your professional career in 2010, 11, 12?
So back then, I was chief digital officer for DCI Group in Washington, D.C. So, and I was still owning a couple of businesses on the side because, why have a full-time job without also, running a company? And then, and actually, I transitioned back to my own companies because I realized I couldn't do everything all at once, and made a smarter decision.
I feel like this has a little bit of that 2011, 2012 feeling to me. Like in 2010, things came to a screeching halt for a lot of people. And then in 2011, it was slow. And then 12, it started to kind of creep back up. And the lessons, as I think about what I learned from that period, there were a lot of great things about the recovery, right? Like the recovery for the survivors was a chance to really grow their business because a lot of their peers had been weeded out, right? The weaker players were gone. And so when things came back, the people that were strong got an outsized market share. They really took in more of the business that was out there than they had before the recession.
Right.
Did you see something similar?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that what we're going through now is very similar to, in many respects, to what happened after the Great Recession, right? In that it's a lot of the changes are going to stick, right? I mean, if I think back to 06, 07, that was still a heady period where we had, huge expense account dinners with clients,
right.
and budgets were like, sure, spend that, try this, let's do this, right. And as we went through that, as you say, 08, 09, 10, it came to a screeching halt, then it crept back, but it even today, or even in 2019, it still hadn't gotten back.
That's right.
To those same heady days, which wasn't all bad.
No.
Right. And there's a lot of bad that's come out of the last year, but there's a lot of good too. And I think that, agencies in particular need to be looking at how they're going to shape themselves for the future, by taking, the lemons and making lemonade, to overuse an expression.
And I think that's an interesting point, Chip, because I think that we've been on pause mentally in a certain way too. I mean, we've made a lot of adjustments, but I think we've thought of those adjustments as being short term. But to your point, I think a lot of these adjustments are actually long term. And so I'm encouraging people to think now about, what is the agency that I want to be in 2022, 2023, 2024? Like, what are the things that are permanent, that aren't changing? And what does that mean about our mission and our vision and our values, and how we're engaging our team and how we're engaging our clients? So that instead of trying to go back to 2019, that we're trying to go forward into a new reality.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think you've hit on something really important there, and it's something that I focus on with all of the agencies I talk with, which is, you need to know, as an owner, where do you want your business to be? What do you want it to look like in the future? How many hours? What kind of hours? What kind of time do you want to carve out for vacations or long weekends? How much money do you need to make? How much would you like to make? When do you want to exit the business? You need to understand all these things, because you should be driving your business towards those personal goals. And that's not selfish, right? I know some agency owners push back and say, but that's,
No.
I got to think about my team. Baloney. But I mean, yes, you have to think about your team, but in the context of what you're building for yourself.
Exactly.
There's no reason to
That's
take
right.
on all of the stress and risk of running your own business if it's not doing what you want it to do. There just isn't. Go get a job, right?
That's right. The team is a tool to get you to the life that you want, or the business that you want, or the profile or impact that you want. Whatever it is that's important to you in that process, the team is how you are getting yourself there.
Right.
And I do think, though, that our teams are waiting for us to kind of make that bold move forward, because they're on hold also. And they're making decisions about, is this where I want to engage my time and energy going forward? And so I think they're waiting for us sometimes to say, here's where I'm going. Are you on board with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether they're consciously waiting for it, but they're certainly not going to take proactive steps themselves.
That's right.
I mean, and that's something that agency owners always need to accept as well. As the owner of the business, no one is going to be nearly as committed or invested in the business as you are. They're just not. And I often talk with agency owners who say, well, how do I get my employees to feel more invested? You don't.
Yes.
You don't. Because you know why? Because they're not invested. Right? They don't own a piece of the business. You can't make them feel like they own the business if they don't own the business.
You should say that whole thing again, Chip, because I have had that conversation a million times. And it's a desire. Like, if I could just clone myself, if I could have another one of me who was as invested as I am. Well, first of all, cloning yourself just means you've got someone else that has all your flaws and makes all the same mistakes. Secondly, no one is going to be that, because you own the business. It's your thing. So Stop even looking for that. That's not a reasonable expectation.
Well, the last thing I want to do is work with another one of myself. I mean, working with one of me is challenging enough. I can't imagine two of me in the same business. But it's the same thing. And it's part of the challenge of getting owners to delegate too, right? Because no one's even setting aside the invested part. People aren't going to do the things that they do as well as they do, because we're different people. Right. I mean, you and I both advise agencies.
That's right.
We do it in different ways. We have different strengths. And to expect that either one of us would do it exactly the same way with the same results is nuts. You can't expect that of your team members either. And if you're going to successfully delegate and get yourself out of the work you don't want to be doing and shouldn't be doing as an agency owner, you need to accept that there's going to be some level of degradation. And so the work needs to be good enough. It doesn't need to be the same as.
And I do think that there's a place where I can expect certain team members to actually be better than I am. I mean, my bookkeeper
Absolutely.
is way better at bookkeeping than I am. Like, don't give me that responsibility. She's 10 times better at it than I am.
Right. But
And-
when was the last time you had an agency owner come to you and bitch because someone was doing better than they were at a job? Right. I'm seriously, right? I mean, that is not a complaint I ever field. I'm never asked, how do I deal with the fact that Sally does this better than I do?
Well, I've never heard someone say that, but I have seen business owners kind of nitpick at that person because they
Sure.
feel a little threatened by the performance that they see out of their team members. And I have had to reframe for people to say, no,
Yeah,
that's
fair.
awesome. That's fantastic that they're
Right.
doing better than you are.
Right. Absolutely.
That's what we
Particularly if it's something you don't want to be doing anyway. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that just, I don't, but I think, getting back to the point of sort of, looking ahead, I think that so much opportunity has come out of the last year that it's important that people are finding ways to capitalize on it. I mean, take advantage without taking advantage, as I like to say.
So let's talk about a couple of those opportunities. Like, what are you seeing that agency owners want to keep going forward? What are the gifts or the silver linings coming out of this whole thing?
I mean, I think at the top of that list is agency owners are obsessed with getting back to retainers, and I think that building a largely retainer-based business in the agency space today is both unlikely to be successful and also not really a good idea. I mean, I think the best agencies have a mix: some retainer business to give some steady income, but lots of project work that allows you to make adaptations to your pricing, to your service delivery, to your targeting, all those kinds of things that are just very difficult to do if you're retainer based.
And I'm talking to people about trying to separate out. So that stuff that you want a retainer for, let's make that into a productized service so that
Sure.
there's very clear expectations and a clear price for that. And sell the heck out of the productized service. Like, that's fine. But then the stuff that is new and different and creative and it's different every time, let's sell that as a custom service offering. Because custom service offerings, the great thing about that is the pricing is, who knows what the pricing is, right? The price, you can really value price that custom service offering and make some more money on it. And so embracing the fact that your business isn't going to be all steady state and it's not going to be all, these wild projects, but figuring out which it is and then making the best out of each of those. So the productized services are very steady and very consistent, and you have clear expectations, and you're not over delivering on that. And then in the customized services, we're offering we're asking for value price on that. And so, when you say that price, it's got to hurt the molars in the back of their teeth sometimes.
Well, and honestly, usually it doesn't. I mean, agencies almost across the board charge too little, and very rarely get true pushback on price from anyone who's actually got any degree of budget. But on the productized service offering, I agree with you. I'm curious, do you get a lot of pushback from clients when you suggest that they should go to a productized service model?
I don't think it's pushback. I think it's a misunderstanding of what a productized service is. I think a lot of people think that they have a productized service, which is, we're going to do 3 projects for you a month, and they can be, whatever you need, but it's, it's $8,000 and you get 3 projects a month. That's not a productized service. That's you spreading your creative service, your custom service offering like peanut butter across the year to match their budget, right? A productized service is something where we can make a checklist and we're going to check these boxes every month and we've done these things. And so it's really popular in the SEO world or
Sure.
analytics or, in your world on the PR side, like social can be very much a productized service, but where it's kind of a repeated series of things that we're doing month after month. And obviously it could be quarter after quarter, whatever it is.
Yeah. See, the pushback that I hear from folks is, but the work we do it's really customized and it's personalized. And so we couldn't possibly, and so then I'll sit with them and I'll walk through their client roster and what their statements of work are and what they're charging. I'm like, you've basically got a productized service here. You're doing roughly the same thing for roughly the same price for the vast majority of your clients. I mean, that is effectively a productized service. So you can tell me that it's customized and personalized and so special, but the reality is it's not. I mean, I put that right up there with folks who tell me, when I say, what's your differentiator? Oh, our team. Our teams are differentiator.
We're more creative.
Really? Really? You have managed to find the most talented people in the world. They just happen to be working for you. Then how is it that this other agency that I just talked to said the exact same thing? You can't all have the most talented people.
Yeah, 100%. And the way I think I hear it is I'll say, so what's your typical engagement? And they'll say, well, we don't have a typical engagement.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you look at their P&L, right, and it's like 5,000.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say. So I say, show me the list of invoices you sent out last month. Oh, look, this looks very typical.
Right. Nothing typical about that at all.
And in truth, if you're going to really do a customized service offering, it takes a lot of work. Like, you really have to think about what is the thing that's going to meet this client's need, and what are a couple different ways that I can deliver it and offer those different options at different price points. And so the reason we get outsized returns on our customized service offering is that we have to put work into really understanding what is going to meet that client's need. And so the productized service it's a lazy way to sell sometimes, but it's also an easy way to buy. And so if you've got a nice package where something is check the box, go ahead, sell it that way because it's easy to buy. But if it's not, then you're really doing yourself a disservice by pushing it into that $5,000 a month or whatever.
Well, I mean, there's also this crazy misconception that a productized service cannot be customized and personalized. But I always like to point out, haircuts are a productized service. Your haircut, my wife's haircut, they all look different. It's a productized service, right?
I hope you don't pay as much for your haircut as I pay for my haircut.
I pay zero. I go to Mr. Bick.
I actually also pay zero for mine. I don't know if you could tell, but
it looks like $1 million, Brad.
There you go. Thank you. Yeah, I have the same person that did Bill Clinton's hair on the runway.
Oh yeah, Christophe. Yes. I don't know why I remember that.
I'm glad you did.
The odd things you keep in your head, but you should use Flowbee. Like I hear George Clooney uses Flowbee.
I didn't hear that. That was too funny.
I guess if you look like George Clooney, you can get by with just.
It doesn't matter how you cut your hair.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I think that's what he proved, right? Your hair doesn't matter. So that's what I'm going with. Your hair just doesn't matter. It's not important. So, but so I mean, what are retainers are one of the things that is something that people should be looking at coming out of this. But what are some of the other opportunities that you're seeing with your clients that they should be looking at coming out of the last year?
I think that we've all embraced remote work, right? And so I don't think we're going to be flying around to meet clients as much as we were in the past. And that has some positive benefits in that I don't have to fly around. But also it means that we're going to be competing against a much wider range of service providers. The local market as a defensible market position, I think, is eroded pretty strongly. And so I'm really pushing people to differentiate harder and really figure out their positioning so that they could compete with essentially the entire English-speaking world. And that doesn't mean you need to be totally unique over every other agency, but there has to be some reason that someone would choose you when they can do a Google search and produce 40 agencies.
Sure. And I would agree on local generally, although the asterisk I would give is if it's a local business with a local audience, I still think there's a role for an agency that specializes in that locality, right? So not merely based on where someone's headquarters is, but because that business is communicating directly with a specific audience. So if you're a PR firm that specializes in a particular media market, and that's all of your businesses are trying to reach that media market, okay, that's fine, right? But if you're doing it just because I'm in Boston and so I'm working with companies headquartered in Boston, I would agree with you. I think that's not viable as a model. But the beauty is not only do we not have to travel, but people have embraced video.
Yes.
Before March of last year, it was like pulling teeth from me to get someone to show up on video on Zoom. And I always liked to do it because I think you make a better connection this way, sort of
I
like
agree.
we're recording this show, because you can see each other.
Yep.
And what I have fatigue about is people talking about Zoom fatigue, because I think it's largely rubbish. It's bad meeting fatigue, right?
Right.
And it doesn't. And we all. I mean, I remember when I was in an agency and I was in 12 meetings a day, and they were in different conference rooms. Those meetings suck too. It's not Zoom that's the problem. It's the meeting. That we have too many meetings that don't serve any purpose, that meander and don't achieve a result. That's what you have to address. I mean, yes, there is some degree of Zoom fatigue because you do have to be, a little bit more on for them even than you do in a conference room. But that's a lesser problem than the fact that a lot of these meetings are either unnecessary or poorly conducted.
I agree with that 1,000%. I mean, certainly from a selling perspective, I would rather be on Zoom than on a phone call. I think there are occasionally business meetings that are better on the phone because I think people get a little more distracted on Zoom. But the ability to be able to share a document.
Time out.
Yeah.
More distracted on Zoom than on a phone call. How many times in your life have you been on a conference call where you're also checking your email or glancing up at the sporting event or news on the TV, or, kind of putting your hand over while you're talking to your family member who poked their head in? I mean, come on. I do not buy that, that Zoom is more distracting. Sorry.
That's a healthy pushback. I will say that I've had a discipline even from the before time that if I'm on a phone call, that I turn my screen off because I don't want to do those things. I want to have a singular focus on the person on the phone.
You're a better man than I am.
So maybe
Brad.
that's just me. That could be a unique perspective. But the ability to be able to share what you're working on instantly and have everybody see it and work together on it. Like, we've really embraced Mural as a tool to get everybody whiteboarding together and moving sticky notes around and whatever. Like, I think those tools are very powerful. And I think we're at the early stages of figuring out how to use them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and I mean, the one advice that I do have for folks is to, generally speaking, try to keep it simple. There is always this tendency to, this new tool, that new tool, let's try to throw all these things into the mix. And so to the extent that, particularly within your agency, if you can standardize on a fairly simple tool set, ideally just, one or two things that you're using, whether that's Mural or something else, you're going to be better off. Because my experience is, myself included, you subscribe to a lot of services you never end up using. And
What?
Yeah, I know. I mean, every quarter I go through my credit card statement just to see what I can cancel. I'll be like, I totally forgot I signed up for that one.
I keep a spreadsheet, and every time I sign up for a service, I have to put it on the spreadsheet. I don't make the bookkeeper do it. I put it on there. And then when in that process, I look back and be like, oh no, let's get rid of that one. That one's no good. Yeah, definitely.
Because we accumulate them, and it's so easy with software as a service today. And as someone who used to run a software as a service business, I appreciate how easy it is to just let them keep running. But as a user, I don't appreciate that, because you do forget that, and particularly because I don't know about you, but I try a lot of free accounts. And sometimes I upgrade, sometimes I don't. And so I'll still see the emails coming in from a service, but I won't remember that I upgraded to the premium. I think, I'm on the free. It doesn't matter. I'll keep getting these emails and just ignore them.
And then they've got a security breach and all your information is out there. I mean, there's like, if I knew all the places that had my email address in some account that I haven't logged into in 4 years, like it would frighten me, I think.
Yeah, I don't worry too much about the security breaches. I use a different password on every site, and I already figured the Chinese have everything I ever even thought. So,
I don't know why they'd be interested, Chip.
But that's my theory too. If you're that interested, go for it. I mean, if there's something in my life that you find interesting, congratulations. But
tell me about it.
Yeah, there's strange people out there. Maybe they do care.
So in addition, what else are you seeing that you think is not going back to the way it was before?
So I think one of the really interesting things is offices. And I think that there are largely two extremes today. The folks who want to get back to their offices as quickly as they can, if they haven't already, and I know some agencies that have gone back to in-office, or those who are like, screw it, I never need an office again. I can just save all that money on rent. And I don't think that either one is the answer. And this is I've been beating this drum for the last 11 months, and I'll probably continue to beat it for a lot longer because I don't think this discussion is going away. Or it's not really even, it should be a discussion. I don't think it is enough because I think a lot of agencies don't realize how lives have changed such that neither extreme is practical. And we're going to have to be in some sort of hybrid environment for the foreseeable future. But to completely, the one that concerns me more is the ones who are completely writing off offices, because there's a lot of good talent out there that doesn't do well with work from home.
I agree. Yeah.
And the immediate one that always comes to mind is parents, but that's not the one that concerns me, because those are the scene. It's the people who are, single, have roommates, people who are of lower income and don't have a home office setup.
That's right.
Those are the people that I worry about, because they don't have a good environment in which to work. And so forcing them to work from a dining room table is not a good idea. And you're not going to keep the right talent.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm seeing also, is that I think there's going to be a role for the office as a place for people who don't want to work from home. And like, the office isn't going to be central the way it was before. And I don't see clients visiting us in the office very often either. Like, the office is just a place where people who don't have a good work from home setup can come and work. And like you said, I think it's people with young kids, it's people, entry level people, which for my clients, we have a lot of those, first 5 years out of college, people working for us, and they don't have a good work from home setup. So I do think there is going to be a mix for a long time. Right.
And so, I mean, on the clients visiting the agency, I think that's the silliest one that I usually hear. Because what I usually say to agencies that bring that up, I'm like, when was the last time you had a client come to your agency? Because I have to tell you, as someone who's worked in and around agencies for 25 years or more, I can probably count on one hand the number of times that clients came to us. Clients want you to go to them. I mean, even when I was, working for DCI, which is a very large agency, they had some clients who would come, but it was very rare. More often than not, we went to them. And that's how it is. So I think that's the silly argument. What worries me more is that people see getting rid of offices as a cost savings, because I don't think if you do remote work right, then it is not a huge cost savings. It may be a little one, although in some cases it may actually be a substantial cost increase. Again, if you're doing it right, because the thing is, once we get to the place where people can come together, if you've got a remote team, you still need to bring people together periodically. And if you've got a team that's spread out geographically, that can actually get to be quite costly. I mean, I worked in an international business, and so we would come together as an executive team 4 times a year. And the cost to do that was astronomical because we were flying people from all over the world. So you have to think through, yes, I'm going to save on rent, but you also need to budget in travel and hotel and meeting space and setting aside a time to bring the team together, because if you never see each other in person, that's not healthy either.
I also think we have to think about some sort of work at home allowance, when we bring new people on, to give them some money to buy furniture or to outfit their home office. And then on a monthly basis, if they're buying all their office supplies, their toner cartridges, they're paying for their phone and their internet and those kind of things, there's some ongoing expenses that I feel like it's not right to push that off onto the employee.
Oh, no, not at all. And you have to, you absolutely have to be investing in that sort of stuff. The other thing you have to keep in mind is it's not always practical, right? So sometimes money doesn't even solve the problem.
Right.
And the biggest one here is internet connections, right? There are a lot of people in the United States and elsewhere who do not have access to high quality internet, even if they have the money.
Yeah.
Here where I live in New Hampshire, I'm fortunate I'm able to get gigabit Ethernet here in my house. But I have to tell you, even though I've got the gigabit internet, I still only have 40 megs up, which isn't a whole lot. I mean, it's honestly difficult to run a business where I do a lot of video content and things like that with just that amount, because uploading videos to a backup server or something like that takes forever.
For sure.
But there are a lot of people who aren't even that fortunate. I know people who have got just double-digit megabits up and down. That's tough. I mean, particularly if you're doing more video, particularly if you're a tech business and a tech agency and doing a lot of that kind of stuff, it's hard. And so you need to be thinking about that as an agency. How practical is it to get your team what they need to be effective?
I think that David Baker threw a number out of, the average that he sees is that rent is about 6% of revenue. And so if we took that 6% of revenue and thought about how would we spend that same money to support our remote team, I think you could have a pretty healthy remote team set up and be cost neutral, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
And you do open up your potential employee base as you go to a fully remote. And to your point, there's also some people you're going to eliminate. And so, it's like anything else, is probably a trade-off. It's probably a trade-off.
Right. And the other thing I would add there is if you are casting that wider net, which I think is a good idea, you also have to be very conscious that you're dealing with your legal and tax people to make sure that you're addressing any additional issues you're creating for yourself by hiring people in other locations, because that
is
can
hugely important.
Because it can create regulatory issues, it can create tax issues, it can create contractual issues. There's all sorts of things that doing that can do. So I'm not telling you not to do it. I've certainly done it, but it may mean you have to file some additional tax returns. Most times you don't actually end up paying net more in taxes, although it depends on the jurisdictions. Coming from a no income tax state, for me, it made some things interesting when I was running some of my businesses in multiple states. I had to be really careful to make sure I didn't do something where all of my income got taxed by another state, because that would not be a good thing.
Not a good thing.
Not a good thing. But generally speaking, it comes out in the wash for most businesses, except for the additional filing fees and things like that. So, but you need to look at that and you need to be aware of it. And if you're looking at international hires, you need to think about that. And these days you have to be really careful with contractors. I mean, particularly California is brutal now with contractors, although they went from being tough to super tough to then they threw it all in a blender and created a whole bunch of exceptions, and nobody really knows what the heck's going on there anymore. So,
and New York and Illinois are right behind them. So
and most states are pushing on this. I mean, it's because states get revenue from having employees more easily than they do as contractors. So, it's certainly something that you need to be aware of, but it does open those doors. I agree with you. If you were to take your rent savings and put that into investing in the team dynamic in various ways, I think that would be a healthy thing to do. But, what I more often see is people saying, I can save $5,000 a month in rent, and I'd be like, great. Except that's not the reality. It's just, you should be shifting that budget.
That's right. Chip, the other thing that I think the pandemic may have done, I had clients that really relied on networking at conferences to generate leads, that was their primary lead generator.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's coming back. I think that people are going to have to shift their outreach strategy if that's the way that they were primarily generating leads.
So here's the first thought. I'm skeptical about that.
Tell me more.
I hear a lot of agencies tell me that, but I think the event networking oftentimes was reconnecting with people that they perhaps had some previous connection with. So I think they conflate it with being helpful to being the source. And I wouldn't in any way dispute that it's helpful to a lot of agencies in the past to have had those. I don't know that for most of them it's as much of a driver as they really think about it, if that makes sense. I
think that if they had speaking opportunities, that was a way to put their thought leadership out there and generate some leads. I do agree with you that it was a lot of reconnecting, right? And it was like seeing and being seen.
Sure. Right. But I mean, the reality is most people weren't doing it off of the speaking. Most were just attending and, at cocktail parties having conversations. So I'm not saying it's not a source. I think that it's overstated by a lot of agencies how much of a source it has been. And obviously there's always the exception that proves the rule. So don't send me an email and say, no, I got 100% of my, fine, you did. Cool. I'm generalizing
here. The rent thing, I think that there's a way to redirect that activity, like you're saying, to do that reconnecting more on a proactive basis, right? And I think it's going to force us to go back to doing outreach in a way that we didn't before. Inbound leads, we were all about inbound marketing, and that's great. But I think there's a place for outbound, especially in a world where we're being more separate and where we're trying to be more geographically diverse in our client base, that some outbound needs to be included in the mix.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But it doesn't have to be scary outbound, right? Because good agency business development is really just about having quality conversations.
That's right.
Right. It's not a true sales process. I always tell you, if you're looking to do sales as an agency and you're looking to close, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
Because you might get someone to sign on the dotted line, but they're not going to be a happy customer. Because it's not a sales process. It's basically a marriage between the client and the agency.
You're romancing the sale.
Yeah. And so you need to get there naturally. You can't force it. Right. And so having an aggressive closing process is forcing it. And you don't want to do that. Yeah. So how can you have more conversations? There are lots of ways these days. In fact, it's a lot easier to have more quality conversations with more people today than it was a year ago. Because we have more time. We're not wasting time on travel. I mean, I spent tons of time on airplanes and buses and cars and all that kind of stuff. And now I can rededicate that time in other ways. I mean, there's a service that I've been trying out the last month or so called Lunch Club.
I've seen
that. And I was skeptical. I got invites for a while. I'm like, forget about this. But I have to tell you, I've done it for 4 or 5 weeks in a row now. And it's been all quality conversations that it is set up. And basically you just say, this is the time that I'm available. And it matches you up with someone who, looks like they might be interesting to you. They're not all potential clients. Some of them are just, interesting people. That's fine. Sure. It's still useful. And I can have a lot more of those conversations than I ever could through, doing in-person meetings when I was traveling. I mean, when I would go to New York all the time to meet with people. At the end of the day, I probably met with 2 or 3 people a day, right? Because by the time you deal with scheduling issues and, usually I would book 4 meetings, 1 gets canceled at the last minute. You've got to have spread between them because, it takes forever to get crosstown, uptown, downtown, whatever. And so you don't do that many. I mean, now if I really wanted to do a push on, New York conversations, I could easily do 6 or 7 in a day. No sweat, just sitting right here, right in the comfort of my own home.
That's absolutely true.
And if it gets canceled, so what? I just turn and do my email. I'm not, stuck in a cab saying, what coffee shop can I go to get some Wi-Fi? Right. So so a lot of these things should become easier. Favorite. What's that?
Hotel lobbies were my favorite holding zone because they had good Wi-Fi and usually you could get a coffee.
Right, and decent people watching. So,
right,
which can be a good distraction when you're traveling. But the other thing is, because I know a lot of people who are they were professional speakers before the pandemic. So that's what they did. Now there's an opportunity to create your own stage, right? And so agencies should be, instead of saying, I'm missing out on these speaking opportunities, they should say, how can I create my own stage? Can I do a virtual event? Can I do live streams like this? Can I do webinars? What can I do so I get in front of people and show them what my expertise is? Don't tell them, don't pitch them, don't market to them. Give them something useful.
That's right. Serve them. Yeah.
So
and I think that's the gold right there. Is if you're missing your conferences, make your own conference. Do a panel discussion, do a webinar, get a few people together just to have an informal roundtable conversation. That's going to be a group that's much more target rich for you, and you're going to have much more progress in terms of what you're going to get out of it.
Right. And you also have to remember, you don't need huge numbers.
That's right.
Most agencies, if they sign 4 or 5 new clients a year, they're having a good year. Right. Now there's exceptions. There's the SEO agencies that are doing volume and that kind of stuff. But the vast majority of agencies who have rosters of between 10 and 20 clients, if they're signing 4 or 5 new ones a year, they're probably growing, 10% a year.
That's right.
That's not a bad existence.
Excellent.
Right. So you don't need to have thousands of people in your pipeline. In fact, you shouldn't. You don't have the manpower to manage it.
Right. That's right.
So anyway. Well, I will stop ranting and raving. Hopefully we have created some good value for people as they have tuned in today. And it's always great talking to you. I don't know, I always seem to be energetic when we talk.
I'm glad. I love talking with you, Chip. I mean, this is what I spend my day doing. So, whether I'm talking to you or talking to someone else.
Yeah, I just talk to the camera. If nobody's around, I just have a conversation with the camera because, I don't know, I like cameras and microphones. It's a sickness that I have. You put a microphone in front of me and you better get out of the way. So, but in any case, this has really been fantastic. If someone wants to learn more about you, Brad, where should they go?
Anchoradvisors.com. If you right there on the homepage, there's an assessment that can help you to see where you are in the process of growing your agency, and it'll give you some ideas of kind of what the next challenges and opportunities are for you. It's totally free. You don't have to put your email address in. Just trying to help people to grow their agencies.
That is fantastic. I would certainly encourage folks to do that. I would also encourage folks, if you're interested in seeing past videos, go to smallagency.tv. That'll take you right to the YouTube page so that you can subscribe, go through the archive, all that kind of stuff. And of course, I always encourage folks to join for free the Small Agency Growth Alliance community. Saga, it's at smallagencygrowth.com/join. Lots of meetups, virtual happy hours, free resources, resource library, blah, 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 all sorts of stuff. So it's totally worthwhile. And since I'm not a sales guy, I'm not going to go running around selling you either. So anyway, so thank you all for joining today. Thank you for being with me, Brad, and for everyone else. I look forward to seeing you back here at noon next Friday for another edition of the Small Agency Talk Show.